They were supposed to be the love story everyone believed in. The kind of story that felt almost scripted by fate itself. Two of the biggest names in the Korean entertainment world, admired by millions, respected for their talent, and followed by fans who had watched their careers grow for years. When whispers first started that Lee Minho and Song Hye-kyo had grown close, it felt like the kind of pairing that only existed in dramas. People joked that real life had finally decided to imitate the stories these stars had spent their careers bringing to life. For a while, it truly felt magical. The public didn't just see two celebrities spending time together. They saw a narrative forming, something that felt bigger than gossip and bigger than headlines. Fans imagined quiet dinners, long conversations after exhausting filming schedules, and the comfort that comes from two people who understand a life lived under constant public scrutiny. In a world where relationships in the spotlight often collapse under pressure, this one looked different. It looked steady, mature, almost inevitable. People began talking about the future before either of them ever confirmed anything publicly. Online communities speculated about engagement rings, wedding venues, and what it would mean for two of the industry's most beloved figures to finally build a life together. It was romantic, hopeful, and for millions of people watching from the outside, it felt like proof that something genuine could still exist behind the polished images of celebrity life. But real life rarely follows the neat, comforting structure of a drama. At first, the changes were subtle enough that most fans didn't notice. A slight shift in tone from insiders. A quiet rumor that a family dinner had not gone the way anyone expected. A small piece of information that didn't quite fit the perfect story people had already built in their minds. These things often happen in relationships, especially when two lives are already complicated by fame, schedules, and public expectations. Most people assumed it was nothing serious. Except the whispers didn't stop. Instead, they slowly grew louder. The kind of quiet tension that usually stays hidden behind closed doors began to ripple outward. Those closest to the situation started hinting that something more complicated was unfolding beneath the surface. Not a dramatic breakup, not a scandalous betrayal, but something almost harder to resolve. Pressure. In the world of Korean celebrity culture, family is not just a private support system. It is often an entire network of expectations, traditions, and deeply rooted beliefs about what the future should look like. When someone reaches the level of fame that Lee Minho has achieved, the decisions in his personal life are rarely seen as purely personal. They carry weight. They represent legacy, reputation, and the long shadow of everything that came before. And that weight can become incredibly heavy. Reports began suggesting that the tension wasn't coming from the relationship itself. It was coming from outside it. Families asking questions that could not be answered easily. Concerns about timing, about priorities, about what a marriage between two global celebrities might mean for careers that were already under constant scrutiny. At first, these were just conversations. Serious ones, perhaps, but still private. The kind of discussions that happen quietly at dinner tables where emotions are strong but cameras are nowhere in sight. But slowly, those conversations began to turn into disagreements. Not the explosive kind that make headlines immediately, but the kind that linger, returning again and again until they become impossible to ignore. For Lee Minho, the situation reportedly became more complicated with every passing week. On screen, he has played characters who face impossible odds with calm confidence. Heroes who make bold choices, stand their ground, and eventually win the love they are fighting for. Audiences have watched him step into those roles so convincingly that it almost feels natural to assume the same certainty exists in his real life. But reality does not follow scripts. Real life does not guarantee that the hero finds a solution in the final episode. People close to the situation describe him as someone caught between two worlds. On one side is the woman he chose to share his life with, someone who understands the pressures of fame better than most people ever could. On the other side is the family that supported him long before the fame, long before the international recognition, long before millions of fans knew his name. Being asked to balance those two forces is not simple. And it becomes even harder when every decision feels like it carries consequences that reach far beyond the people directly involved. For Song Hye-kyo, the situation carries its own emotional weight. Her life in the spotlight has never been simple. Over the years, she has faced intense scrutiny, public criticism, and personal challenges that would have been overwhelming for many people. Yet she managed to rebuild her image and her career with a kind of quiet resilience that earned admiration across the industry. Fans watched her rise again with strength and dignity, proving that setbacks did not define her. That history is part of why so many people were hopeful about this relationship. It felt like the possibility of a new chapter, one that might finally offer the stability and happiness people believed she deserved. Which is why the idea of resistance from outside forces feels particularly painful for those who care about her story. There is something difficult about watching someone who has already endured so much face another wave of uncertainty, especially when that uncertainty revolves around something as deeply personal as love. Meanwhile, the silence from both sides has only made the situation more intense. In an era where celebrities often respond quickly to rumors, the absence of clear statements has created a vacuum filled with speculation. Every small detail becomes a clue. Every public appearance is analyzed for hidden meaning. Fans search for signs in interviews, social media posts, even body language during unrelated events. Silence, in a situation like this, can feel louder than words. Some insiders suggest the lack of public response is intentional. Speaking openly about family disagreements could create even deeper wounds. Once private concerns become public debate, it becomes much harder to resolve them peacefully. Keeping quiet might be the only way to protect the people involved from a storm that could easily spiral out of control. Still, the longer that silence continues, the more questions begin to grow. People wonder whether the relationship is strong enough to survive the kind of pressure that rarely appears in public discussions about celebrity romance. It is easy to celebrate love when everything seems perfect. It is much harder to protect that love when powerful voices begin asking whether the relationship should exist at all. And that is where the story stands now, balanced on an uncertain edge. There are really only two paths forward, though neither of them is simple. One possibility is that Minho decides to stand firmly behind the life he wants to build. That he listens to the concerns around him, but ultimately follows his own heart. If that happens, the story could transform into something powerful. A reminder that even in an industry shaped by expectations and tradition, personal choices can still win. But the other possibility is harder to think about. Pressure has a way of wearing people down slowly. Not through one dramatic moment, but through repeated conversations, doubts, and emotional strain that gradually reshape what once felt certain. Relationships that seemed unbreakable can begin to fracture under the weight of constant questioning. If that happens here, the ending will not be explosive or scandalous. It will simply become another quiet story about two people who almost made it work but couldn't find a way past the obstacles placed in front of them. For the millions of fans who believed in this love story, that outcome would feel deeply disappointing. Not just because they admire these two individuals, but because the relationship had come to symbolize something hopeful. A reminder that behind the glamour and the spotlight, real connections were still possible. Right now, though, the truth is that nobody outside the inner circle truly knows what the next chapter will look like. Maybe the tension will fade with time. Maybe conversations that once felt impossible will lead to understanding. Families can change their minds. Perspectives can shift. Love has survived difficult odds before. Or maybe the story will take a quieter path, one where both people move forward separately, carrying the memory of something that might have been extraordinary under different circumstances. What makes this moment so compelling is the uncertainty itself. The feeling that the ending has not been written yet. Somewhere behind the carefully managed public appearances, real conversations are still happening. Decisions are still being made. Emotions are still being weighed against expectations that stretch far beyond the boundaries of a typical relationship. And until those decisions become clear, the world can only watch and wait. Because for now, the love story that once looked like a perfect fairy tale is standing at a crossroads, and even the people living inside that story may not yet know which direction it will take next.